there, welcome back to Fans of Fandom, the Dark Ages of DC. We are continuing our deep dive discussion or dissection, whole lot of alliteration, on the Funeral for a Friend arc. So I'm Dr. Eric Wesselman, psychology professor, full-time nerd. I'd like to introduce my co-host, Mr. Victor Dandridge Jr.
Why, hello. I'm Victor Dandridge, lovingly called the hardest working man in comics. I'm a comic book author, publisher, and phenomenological narratologist. Say that 3 times fast, and I will appear behind you. Yes.
You don't have to look in a mirror, right?
Yeah. No. And if you can do it 3 times fast, I appear behind you. I high five you, and then I go away because no one can do that, not even me.
You show up with free comics.
Yeah. That's how you get free comics. You say that word 3 times fast, and I leave like free comics in your shoes or something like that. Yeah.
There we go. Excellent. Well, welcome back, Victor.
Thank you.
So, and we have our special guest, Dr. Brittany Oliver C.S. Navarro. So, welcome back, Brittany.
Yeah. Dr.
Tell us a little bit about your specialty.
I was like, I'm from Alliant International University, specialize in grief and loss, and death and dying, and work with transitional age youth, so 16 and 25.
Love it.
Excellent. Well, before we dive in, as always, we're going to be talking about some heavy topics, which may trigger some folks listening or watching. So, as always, please remember that the National Suicide and Crisis Prevention Hotline is 988. You can also go to Psychology Today's website, and they've got a nice little app that you can look for therapists in your area who will either meet you in person or virtual therapy as well. Now, since we last chatted, there have been new things that have occurred relevant to our discussions. San Diego Comic-Con came and went, and what they released there was related to, ironically, the issue that we didn't even show any shots from or any panels from. But McFarlane Toys decided to re-release a special edition version of Adventures of Superman 499. I find it interesting they picked that issue, probably just because they released a figure of that cover, right? And so, I mean, so here's, for example, what the issue looked like. And so a friend of mine who was out there and bought it confirmed for me that the only difference between this and the original is just the cover. Picture of the...
Okay.
Yeah. So the cover, the front cover, back cover, because I was like, should I? I did buy the statue on eBay.
But not the book?
Issue... Well, no, because they were selling it separately for about the same price.
Of course they were. They were.
And so I was like, I messaged my friend and I was like, so have you looked at the book yet? Anything new in there? And they're like, no, just the cover. Everything directly print. I'm like, okay, all right, well then just the statue, and I will use screenshots.
There you go.
They did do a variant, because you got to do variants, right? Which is not something unique to now or the 90s, but the 90s in particular was notorious for hashtag all the variants. They did a glossy version for both the front and the font on the back. And you can see behind me the statue, but for those who can't see that well, here is another screenshot of what the statue looks like. So I wanted to throw that in there.
I love it. I always wondered if that was any sort of the inspiration for Superman Prime from the Superman 1 million storyline. The idea that Superman goes into the sun and is there for like 1,000 years, and when he comes back, he's all gold because he's absorbed so much solar energy. He has like a little showcase in All-Star Superman towards the end of it. So I've always wondered if that had any sort of relevance to that design or not.
Yeah. Well, and this idea of a statue, and I'll throw a picture in editing, shows up also in the Snyderverse. Right? In the Justice League movie before Superman is resurrected. It's a different statue, but they have
Same concept.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Very, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. I have some other.
I appreciate your fandom.
Oh, good. I'm glad at least one person does.
I definitely do.
Both
I definitely do. I definitely
Well,
appreciate
thank you
it.
both. Everybody else who lives with me is like,
They just don't understand.
Really?
They don't know.
Um. So I think it was the last couple episodes that we did. All right, we covered Funeral for a Friend Part 4, Metropolis Mailbag number 2. And because I can't stop, I won't stop, and I don't even try anymore. I tracked down Metropolis Mailbag 1.
Did you?
I did, and I shopped local
Nice.
for it. They had it.
Nice.
So this, was but both were released in February cover dates because that would have then corresponded to December releases store.
Right.
And so we have here this like really interesting image composite here, right? We've got Superman reading a letter. We've got the sort of holly, the ball ornaments along the side, a Merry Christmas call out box in the bottom. And then you have in the background this text that he's reading, right? Which is juxtaposed with the typical holiday season, as we've talked about. There's holly jolly, and then there's wow, here's real life.
I think there's something really interesting about the presentation of Superman in a very somber way. He's a character that's often presented as representing hope and optimism. And here, there's almost already a sense of defeat that's set in this presentation of him, which I think is very interesting because it speaks to one of those truisms about the character of Superman that he isn't actually all powerful. That is something that is a misnomer when it comes to what he can do or how he does what he does. There are limitations, like literal limitations to things that he can and cannot do, despite the amazing impossibilities that he does on a regular basis. And something like this, I think, speaks to that kind of level of feeling and thought and constraint that the character of Superman represents. It goes into the notion of harking back historically, like, oh, if there are wars in a world where there's Superman, how does that work? He could easily just come in and stop them and just say, hey, you're done fighting. We're not fighting with these tools anymore. If you want to fight, you can play chess. I don't know. Like anything of that level speak to that reality base of Superman. And it's one of those kind of like, I don't know, it's a rewarding sort of station to kind of think like, it's great that as powerful as he is, there are limits. But at the same time, it also becomes very sobering when you go, "Oh man, I wanted this world of fantasy and brilliance, and here we go, saddling it with the truth, the reality that happens all the time." I did just mention All Star Superman, and there's a piece. I don't want to spoil it supremely, but there is a piece in there where there's an engagement or interaction with Superman dealing with kids in a cancer ward, and the solution of what he comes up with is so very fantastic, and you wish like, oh my god, that would be so great. And it's presented in a way that explains why Superman himself has never done it because he physically can't, but finding those that could makes it work. And so it's one of those things where you go, wow, how do you balance the fantastical concept of what Superman is supposed to represent in terms of hope and optimism with the reality of things that happen on the outside, everyday life, and what would it be like if Superman existed like that?
And that's why we want supers. So
Yes.
that we can see them be human. Because
Yes.
I look at this, I like you pointing out that there's like any kind of holiday stuff I missed because the only thing I can focus on is this letter and the facial expressions that they have. It's like, okay, well, I can see myself in this person, but then you don't see all the little Easter eggs that are throughout, like not just the front, like this front, or throughout like, the entire comic.
That's wild.
Well, yeah,
I
because I mean,
do.
our eyes in Western culture, right, left to right, top to bottom,
Yeah.
So we're gonna hit the cursive there, which I also, this particular moment while I was looking at it, I thought, well, this is kind of an anachronism because they don't really teach cursive anymore.
We're just
in
saying our
public.
age. Okay, we get it.
I mean, listen. We have skills that were developed over a time period that kids today won't have.
Right.
Good
So
reframe.
this, years from now, will be like, do I need a cipher for this?
Yes.
But so we've got this, the all this text here, and I love, Victor, you point out the somberness, right? Because every time, and I'll unpack this when I pull some of the images that I show up, right? But we have this shadow on his face, right? But you also have, and I just noticed this right now, his symbol.
Yes.
The red is gone.
Yep.
But he's the red of the cape is there.
Right. So that's a choice. That is an absolute choice for again creating a sense of somberness. When you have the Superman shield, demure, very modest, very, toned down, that is a sentiment because that's not the trademarked form of what the Superman S looks like.
I just love when you guys bring up things where I'm like, dang, I didn't even notice. Like, whoa, that's crazy.
I mean, and it's part of the fun of this, right? These are things that we might not have even seen it the first time that we ever saw this issue, but just over time. And that's one of the things that I love about comics, especially, is comics meet you where you are, and where you are can change. So when you go back, you can see and be like, oh my God, like that's crazy. Like, what if you go back and you realize that each of the balls represents another character? Like, is that possible? Like, I don't know, like the bluish silver with the red line to the right. I don't know why, but it reminds me of Deadshot. I have no reason to necessarily think that, but what if, somebody comes to us like, oh, actually, that is an Easter egg that each of those balls represents a bad guy. And like ridiculous,
Ooh.
but that would be cool, right? Like, I don't know. You get all sort of.
This is like when we talk about comics, right? And I'm thinking about this because a colleague of mine, who does mostly, well, a lot of different podcast series, but they put Dr. Anna Pepper posted recently on their social media, hey, when you talk about comics, talk about the images too. Don't just talk about the story, because it's a gestalt, right? So
It's all together. You gotta give it the respect. Although, okay, I'm gonna say something that can be very dangerous for my position, but I think it is a necessary clarification that the industry needs to start looking at. We do have a thing where oftentimes people will associate a run through writers and not necessarily include the artists. And while I can't say for sure that this is why, but it is my justification as to why that's possible, most of the time those runs won't change writers, but they can have different artists along the way. And so if somebody does say a writer specific run, that's not necessarily to denote a dismissal of the artist, but it could be that there were multiple artists, but one writer, and it's easier to denote a span of titles based off of one creative versus listing an entire, line of folks that might have contributed to it. So it's not necessarily a dig at the artist, but it's more of a clarification that there was at least one writer that spearheaded the whole thing, and that's the easy way to denote it.
Yeah, so practicality.
Yes. It's respectfully not a diss. It is practical to just have one listing because that's the one person you can guarantee is credited for that entire run of product.
Well, no, and I know Dr. Pepper, she also posted that another reference to when reading scholarship, she was annoyed when they would refer only to the writer as the author of that series, and not also mentioning at least the pens, if not the inks, right?
Because they matter. They matter.
Yeah, they do. I was just the other day, maybe I'll scan that image and drop it in here. I was looking through an old 80s or 90s trade press, and this particular trade press would every so often pick an image, pick some pens, and they would hire 4 different noted inkers to give it their own spin, and then they would publish them all together, and you could see how different the pictures looked based on the inker.
True.
All right, really into the weeds there. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. It's what we do.
So I'm gonna throw this first image up here. This was, I scanned the first page and I just picked out the top. So we get very first thing we see, date December 23rd, 2 shopping days till Christmas. We get a bell, which most of us in the West would assume, okay, that's like a Santa stand-in. And then you've got the author here, or the voice of God, saying, "For some a time of joy, time of giving the heart for others." And then we get Superman's angst, right? Now we don't quite know what that angst is yet, right? But I want to just kind of sit here for a second and throw this out, like this is a holiday issue, right? Now I guess we have the first cover, which is setting people up for knowing that this is going to be an emotionally complex issue. But what, just, do you have any feelings y'all want to share about this beginning here?
I got a bunch, but I'll wait. Brittany, do you want to go?
Yeah,
Brittany.
I was just thinking, and we've talked about in previous episodes that like one of the highest times that people get hospitalized like psychiatrically is during the holidays. And this internal narrative of like, why do I do this to myself? I think about so many families who feel burdened by not just family, but by holidays, by celebration, by having to forcefully do something that they feel like they're supposed to. And I think that most heroes, in my opinion, would feel some joy in being able to assist others at this, and simultaneously feeling overwhelmed and overstimulated by it. Like, I'm a therapist in the real world and it's great and I love helping people and it's wonderful, but this week was hard. I had a lot of emotional just weight this week. And so I'm just thinking about, in his position, day to day, week to week, month to month, especially when it's hard, especially when the weather's changed, especially when there's more obstacles to face, like can become burdensome. And I think for individuals who struggle with mental health, regardless if you're here or not, or you're listening or not, I think that the weight of these circumstances can be very challenging. And the internal monologue can become a little bit more severe. And so we get to see, and like this, like the facial expression isn't heroic, it's defeated. And you see the literal or physical weight of like, God, I have to do this other thing. Like, I'm putting myself through something else. And so this again is that humanistic piece of like, when we look up to supers and we love when they're powerful and brave and wonderful and they thrive, but then there's also so much human element to it of it can be hard too.
Brittany, if I may, so when you said there was so much weight this week, that was outside the therapy room. That was just your life.
Oh no, I mean inside, like just like with like managing crises and things of that nature. It's just life or life with making sure I support them, calling. There's a lot of resources that you guys can utilize depending on your state and city, like Access and Crisis Line, 988. Like there's so many resources, but a lot of people need a lot of support. And so sometimes clients need more than others than other times. And this just happened to be a tight week.
If I may, and draw a circle here to in my mind, right? So it was rough for you right? To be with folks in that space, which it's rough for everybody, but especially for therapists who I've heard other people's referred to as almost like modern sin eaters, right? You know, and I know, for example, students in our various programs that deal with mental health, there's a discussion of, well, how do we avoid burnout? How do we engage in self-care so that we can have, you know, be in that moment empathic, but not have it suck the life out of you. And you got a life outside the therapy room too, right?
Yeah.
That draws on your energy as well. Like, so the helpers also need help.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes this so powerful, because it does speak exactly to that concept right there.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I was like the notion of like even like during the pandemic, you think like who are the essential workers, right? Like who are the people who are like the ones that we like can salute as heroes? The people who are like, you know, doing the job that they're able to do to assist other people. How daunting is it? And I don't like the word burden because I don't think that that's what it is, but it is daunting. And I can only imagine being in the role of somebody who is all powerful, all encompassing, somebody who has so much on the line, and then still having to give more. And how hard is that, or challenging is that? Because at this time, you are number one. You're not number 10, you're not 25, you're number one. And so everyone's going to look up to you, everyone's going to respect you, everyone's going to be expecting of you. And how potentially exhausting could that be, because you have to be the best version of yourself constantly, and none of us are. So that's just tough emotionally, psychologically, physically, spiritually, in all the ways.
What I love about this is that, like, with just this like simple two-panel setup and the conversation coming off of the cover, it begs to challenge the pop cultural concept of who is the real person between Clark Kent and Superman. And I think that's one of these moments where some people overanalyze in the wrong direction. Kill Bill famously says that Superman is performing a critique of humanity with his portrayal of Clark Kent. But the truth is, Clark Kent as a person is who he is, because that's who he was raised to be. Like, he was always Clark Kent. Now, the bumbling, fumbling thing could be a caricature of sorts that is a play up of maybe how he felt as an outsider growing up, things like that. But him being human, that is who he is, because that's what he was raised to be. It wasn't until he was much older that he even found out he was Kryptonian, and the concept that that should just overshadow or overwrite anything else that he has from a humanistic point of view is silly, because it shouldn't do that. It is in that regard that, in truth, being Superman is a lot easier than being Clark Kent. These are the moments where, and I'm sure they'll tonally get to that, he would rather be fighting Darkseid right now than having to do this thing, because what he's about to do is so much more human than it's so much more man than super. And that's the thing that he always has to struggle with, is how do I balance that part? I understand full well that I have the power to do a lot of things as the super, but I have a responsibility to not do a lot of things as a man, because I am just a man. I am just like anybody else. I still have the same limitations as anyone else in some way, shape, or form. There are certain things that I cannot fight. The IRS and death. Like, it's not like, and it's not until later on that he finds out that death is a little trickier for Kryptonians. But that's not even his understanding for himself initially. Like, that's something he has to learn along the way, because he still walks as a man. And like you said, Brittany, when you have a context of people who are essentially our saviors, and we never think of the fact that sometimes they need saving, even from small things like emotional context, emotional struggles, emotional weight, the dauntingness of the responsibility that they're taking on, that's a lot. Like, we tend to write heroes that are perfect in that way. They don't struggle with the responsibility of what they do. And it's so brilliant that comics, through an evolution of characters, have allowed for those things to come through that give us that true reflection of reality. In Golden Age Superman stories, it was big cheery and I'm going to smile and I'm going to stop the bad guy and ho hum, that's all good. We get to Spider-Man and now we see, wait, there's a cost to doing this.
Yeah.
And that cost rises in scale. With great power comes great responsibility. Well, who turn it around? Who has more power than Superman? Then what level of responsibility does he feel? Especially considering, like, it's not even just a matter of him knowing intrinsically. Like, we all know that there are people in the world who struggle, who need help. This guy can hear them, like, on a regular basis. He has to take effort to block out hearing all the struggles of everyone else. That's a very difficult thing to do. One, to actively do it, and two, be aware that you're doing it, because he has to actively be aware of the fact that I am ignoring problems just so I can be a person. I am ignoring problems. And I am, like, the level of personal balance that he has, that is a wonderful thing. Because imagine how, oh my God, how damaging it could be for Superman to have that idea crisis of when he goes, do you know how many people I ignore on a regular basis? And coming to terms with what that is, like how many people I should be Superman 24/7 and I'm not. And I do that, one, for myself as well as to myself, because I can still hear all the problems. And really, when I jump in, it's because I can't stand not doing it. You know, oh, there was a car that almost hit a, yeah, and I couldn't stand hearing that again. So I'm jumping in on this one. As silly as it is, that's why I'm saving this cat from the tree, because I can't stand hearing that little girl cry. You know, when I ignored all the other ones that did, I can't stand it. I got to jump in on this one.
Well, I wonder, and I can only speculate now as an instructor, basic researcher, not a health specialist, but I anticipate that's probably part of the struggle that contributes to burnout for whether we're talking about mental or physical health professionals, is when you choose to turn it down, then there potentially is some guilt for being like, well, why am I not thinking about this? Why am I not thinking about that person's need?
1000%.
So I'm sorry. Well, please.
No, I would say for anybody who's interested in the mental health field, a marriage and family therapist. I happen to work for the county. Love my work. Love the busyness of it. You will have a schedule of maybe 5 clients, and in the interim between client 1 and 5, 16 people might call you and say, I need something, I need support, I'm thinking of suicide, I'm self-harming, I'm again, please utilize resources in the event of a crisis. Like I'm fighting with my family and I just need you right now, but I need to attend to the people that are scheduled and simultaneously need to attend to your crisis as well. So it's this constant juggling of emotions of not only theirs, but yours, and like this prioritizing of, like Victor was saying, whose needs gets heard. And is it the ones that are the loudest, like that cat in the tree, and we want to pacify this child? Or I'm sorry I can't get to you. It has to be next week. But what if the crisis is now? Then you have to think about safety issues. Then you have to think about like what happens if something happens over the weekend and it's Friday at 4:58 and they call me and they need me. Like you learn to figure out how to juggle it, but it can be emotionally overwhelming. And I know that there are so many jobs and so many professions that are super in so many ways. Teachers, nurses, doctors, like all firefighter, everybody, like so many people support so many people all the time. But it's can be emotionally compromising because you can't save them all. Um, and it's horrific. It's a horrible feeling to go home and be like, I only had 5 minutes for you when you really deserved 50. And it's It's hard. I can't really explain it more than it's hard.
Yeah, yeah. I wrote in my series The Samaritan, I start off the third issue where the character Smith is flying around and he's talking about the fact that he can hear all of the struggles that are happening all across the globe. Like he is actively aware of all of it and having to deal with that truth that I can't save everybody. Like the thing that I can hope for is that the next person I save is you. Whoever you is, I hope that I am there to be able to save you. I hope I'm proximately available. I'm conscious of it, like whatever. And it's kind of one of those things where, as a shout out to superheroes, to really see the full totality of what this role is. It's not just saving the day. It is bearing the weight of those people that you didn't save. I would be curious to know, like, I'm not wishing this to be written, but I mean, it would be a thing. If there's a notebook somewhere that Superman has of every day, he writes down the names of all the people he didn't save.
Dang.
Right? Like, just to show, like, I'm aware of this and I am going to remember you in some way, shape, or form. If there's some codex in the Fortress of Solitude where he has written down every day the names of people that he did not save, and it's not a question of whether he could have or not, it's that he didn't. And I just want to acknowledge you. I want to remember you. I want to acknowledge you because I wasn't there. And it's how interesting would that be as a conversation of, is that catharsis, or is that another yoke that he's putting on himself that is almost a punishment that, however many names he has to take the time to write them. Granted, he could probably do it really fast and probably also in cursive and people wouldn't know, but like, what an interesting, definitely it's Kryptonian cursive, which is even harder. But like, if he does something like that, what does that say? And I think very much so, in the way that we're kind of breaking this down, it depends on the person. When you read it, where you are when you read it, maybe it is cathartic in one way, maybe it is a punishment in another way. There's magic to the things about these stories that I think help. To the point of what you were saying, Brittany, that there comes a point where you almost go, well, damn, that just feeds into the nihilistic point of view. Like, well, if you have struggles too, then what's the point? The point is, we as humans can find a way to look for the opportunity of a tomorrow. And for Superman to be the man of tomorrow, representing that concept through and through, that is the point of these stories. It is to say that there is a light at the end of the tunnel if you can just find a way to get to it. Whether that's holding on or stepping forward. If you can find a way, it's there. That's the beauty of these things. So even though we have kind of started off this conversation sounding so very sad and downtrodden about it, I think the whole point is, this is a guy who, as great as he is very grounded and understands that what he's about to do is a showcase of the world that he lives in that he can't control. He can be a part of it. He can be a positive force within it, but he can't control it. And he shouldn't control it either. This is kind of that price of being a god in a human world. I'm not above you. I will be a part of you as best as I can. And sometimes I'm going to subject myself to things that other people will be like, you don't got to do that. And he's like, yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
And it
because they deserve it.
Yeah.
Can I tell a random story?
Please
Let's
do.
go. Let's go.
I went to I left earlier earlier this week, and I just happened to park at 7-Eleven just to get some snacks, and then somebody a young woman wasn't able to pay her stuff, and I was like, I'll pay for you, it's fine. The second that I walk out, there's a car that's overturned and there's two small children trapped underneath.
No.
A man that's hurt, he's holding himself, and I immediately run the crisis. Who's called the police? Who's doing what? We pull these kids out, and I'm like, it's your privilege to be knowledgeable of how to handle these situations. It is privilege to be like, I know that I am capable and competent enough to be able to support the people that need supporting. because there's people taking videos and photos and things of that nature. But like I not in the like I'm a hero, but like in heroic roles, you take the burden as a privilege. Like
Yes.
it's like the whole like pressure is a privilege, right? Idea, like another sports term. But I think that that's the whole point, is that here are these people who are able to be as resilient as possible despite the fact that there are challenges in their lives day to day and how hard it can be day to day.
I love it.
Well, and,
I love it.
The connection that we have to these characters, right? Because they're sort of fantastical by nature, right? The situations that they're in are fantastical. But what do we draw from? Right. And we draw from that understanding that we have strengths, we have weaknesses, and we are doing our best to navigate those, whatever they may be. And right, so someone could look at this and say, I can't fly, I can't lift mountains, etc. But what can I do in my sphere? And what do I feel called to do, driven to do, right? And sort of recognizing that having to navigate that space. So I think that is part of what makes these stories so powerful. Is that we all have different skill sets, we're all in different situations, but we understand this. You've kind of gone back and forth, Brittany, between like you talked about burden, you talked about the pressure of the privilege. I'm sorry, did I? Yeah,
It's both.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So, well, I'll pivot next because we'll get a little bit more about Superman's inner thoughts here. Because then he moves to what he knows he can handle, where he feels comfortable. Right, the Eradicator, Intergang, Mr. Mitsiplik. Maybe I pronounced that right. Maybe I pronounced
Makes
it
you
wrong.
spit lick.
Oh, there we go. Okay,
yeah,
all right.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Did I just actually you? I'm so sorry.
But these are forces, challenges he knows he can handle easily. And then he says, like right here at the end, this is a losing proposition from the word go. Right. So just through our conversations here, Brittany, Victor, this last week in class I taught Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay.
And I watched it twice because I teach 2 sections. And Spider-Ham, in that moment where they're all supporting Miles after his uncle was murdered by Kingpin, he says the hardest part is knowing that you can't save everyone. Even if you have the knowledge, even if you have the skills or the strengths, you still have limits.
Yes.
Right. And what I love about, and I really want to I don't know how many of these things are collected, but as I go dig through them, and I really want to find collected editions of these folks, the Super Summits run post John Byrne, because so much of what it seems like they were trying to do is, then you tell a good story, you need conflict, right? You need something that provides tension. And that was always a big criticism. Victor, you referenced Kill Bill, right? The golden age Superman is that he's kind of a god, and so where is the tension here? Well, we got to create kryptonite. We got to create these other things. And so much of what Carlin's crew was doing was trying to find situations where Superman was put in binds, where his powers couldn't get out of that.
Yeah.
Right. And so here, yeah, and so that's what this issue is all about.
Because I have I'm gonna be very therapisty.
Let's go.
Yeah, let's bring it.
So there's this metaphor of like swimming upstream, like you're walking down a river and somebody's drowning, and you rush in and you pull them out, and then they're like, thank you, thank you. And then another person's drowning, and then you rush in and you swim them out, like pull them out, and they're like, thank you, thank you. And at this point, you're becoming exhausted. There's another person who's coming out, and you try to save them, and now you're almost too fatigued to be able to get back in, but there's another person that comes out, and at some point you get out of the water and you have to let them float by, because like I have to figure out who's pushing the people in. And I think that this is a different kind of story where it's like, instead of being like, I'm the hero, I can always save everyone, it's I need to figure out how to be a different type of hero.
Yeah.
Not only is that super poignant when it comes to this particular era of superheroes in comics, which really kind of came about from Alan Moore's work on Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns, where we're looking at the concept of being a hero as not just a simple black and white concept. That there are going to be things that I do as a hero that might have to rely on the bigger picture, but also understanding that my macro still could destroy what is your macro, right? Because your macro might not be the macro, but this person was my life. They were my mom, they were my dad, they were my protector. Without them, I have nothing. And you chose to go, well, I got to let them go to find out macro wise what is causing this problem to begin with. And that is this fundamental dynamic of choice and complexity that we as human beings wrestle with on a regular basis. And forgive my statement of the fact that we're in a political climate, especially right now, where we weaponize those ideas when the truth is it is a constant flow. There is no one right answer. There are many answers that are correct for many people. And it's the problem is that everyone is trying to plant a flag and say this is the right spot. No, this is the right spot for you right now. That could literally change given the next few minutes. But that's the beauty of having these stories that are basically modernized myths that tell us how we're supposed to approach life, and seeing how they have evolved and their complexity of the stories that they tell. It was starting off with do good, be good, you are good. You get to a point where you go, well, what is good? Is good what everyone agrees is good? Is good what I decide is good? Is good sometimes walking away and allowing what life has set up to play out? Maybe that's what's good, because now you're talking about a bigger circumstance of consequence. And if people don't understand consequence, they don't actually learn anything. And like there's all these wonderful little tidbits, little caveats of learning that happen by us engaging and reading these stories. And the best part about it is it helps us discover our truths. Like it's seeing, okay, this is why I am a Superman person versus a Batman person versus a Flash person versus a Green Lantern person. All of these characters are speaking about a truth, and you associate the one that best aligns with you. And none of them happen to be, antagonistically wrong. You don't have to say, well, because you said this, you're wrong. You go, I'm right for me. And you go, okay, I get it. I get it. Like there's beauty in that. And that's what elevates comics to this point to literature. It's not just stories for little kids. This is true to life conversational material that anyone can sit down and, I mean, again, we are 3 panels in at this point, and we are having long form conversations about the personal ramifications of the implication of this. We haven't even gotten into the actual story yet, but just the setup alone, we have to sit down and go, yeah, what does this mean to me for what they're showing here?
Eric, is there a choir behind you? I'm looking
Stop
for the
it, stop
church.
it.
I don't know.
Hallelujah. 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 Stop.
Yeah, but I mean, there is no, when I teach students on the psychology of moral decision making and the way we think about morality, we like to treat it as a binary, most of us, because it's simple. There's a right, there's a wrong, and it should be, when we're sitting in our comfy chairs, in our privilege, to say, yeah, well, this is what you should do, right? But y'all ain't in that we're not in that situation.
Come on now.
And there is no, I shouldn't say there is no, so I try to avoid
absolutes.
Right? Only Siths deal in absolutes,
which is an absolute statement unto itself. Just want to throw that out there.
But there isn't necessarily a clean way out of it. Right. And so Brittany, the example you gave earlier about the person jumping in on that fourth person and having to let that person go because they just can't do it anymore, right? That has a cost. If they chose to do it, though, that also has a cost, right? And to pretend that there isn't in the way we tell the stories is probably not, well, I should say, I use the word dishonest, but that's the only word that I can come to mind right now, is it's missing a good chunk of it. Another example, when I teach my students about, being in, committed relationships and the willingness to sacrifice. And, I'm talking to young people who are about to graduate, and they're going to have to decide, do I tether myself to this person for a long period of time, and what decisions am I going to make? And I say, well, yeah, but that's a real decision, right? One of you going to have a job, one of you not. Are you going to take jobs separately? I mean, these are, and you do you, right? You collectively. But to suggest there isn't going to be struggle, that there isn't going to be sacrifice, is not accurate to lived life. So anyway, that's a whole nother lecture I won't jump into.
No, I love it. I love it.
But so let's go to this next series of panels that I pulled out, because between these two, so Clark Superman Clark lands, meets Lois and pretends to only know her casually, and vice versa. And then goes in, and then this issue is so amazing, just like Metropolis Mailbag 2, because there's like no punching, there's no action, it's all interpersonal drama. And so we get these wonderful moments where they're just having conversations. And they're reading through letters, and of course a bunch of them are like, hey, Superman, help me find the lost city of gold, we'll split the profits, these types of things. And then he picks up one and he starts to read it, and we get this left-hand panel where you've got this wonderful use of shadows again, right? This extreme close-up. And he just stops and goes, I'll be back as soon as I can. He flies, and then we find out what he read, right? And there's this woman who who's a Holocaust survivor, and she finds out she has some family living in Europe, and that person's going to die, and she can't afford to fly there, right? And here is just this living on a prayer, right, moment where she just writes to Superman and is like, hey, maybe you could help me, probably not, but I'm going to try, right? And this is something he realizes he can help with, right? So he goes off and flies, and I'll go to this next thing, and then we can discuss. But he picks her up, takes her to the hospital where her sister is, and the woman is like, I can't believe someone as important as you is helping me. Surely there's other people who need you, right? And I just love this moment where he says, right now, Mr. Shomer, you are the most important thing on my mind. That's all. No, please do.
I'm gonna be the bad person right now.
Do it.
Bad person.
Do it.
I work with
be the alternative perspective.
I work with transitional age youth, and every time we work with them, we always say, like, teach them how to fish so that they know how to fish, because at 25, they're out the door. If we've taught them no skills, they'll know nothing. And so the word burden is difficult. The privilege of challenge.
Privilege of challenge. Okay. Trademark that, Brittany.
The privilege of challenge is, I can support you, but does this lead to learned helplessness? Like in a world in which you have all of these like this resource as a Superman,
Mhm.
am I more willing to send a letter
Mm-hmm.
than make to figure out how to do it on my own?
Mm.
Because some I've heard on some probably some podcast or radio show or something, it was like the people who ask money from you, and if you say no, they'll figure it out.
Mhm.
And so will most of these people
Mhm.
in the stories. So
Mhm.
it's interesting. It's like it's this duality between I want to be, and it's not even heroic. I want to help, but I also know that people can help themselves. And
Mhm.
there are definitely situations where people do absolutely need help.
Mhm.
Um, um, Theft, some sort of disaster, some alien
Mm-hmm.
invasion, of course.
Mhm.
But is this requiring of help?
Mm. Mm. Does it not even does this require help? Does this require Superman's help?
Yeah.
Could Clark Kent have sent her a ticket?
Mhm.
Like respectfully, like
Really? Yeah.
him and Lois could have
Right.
been like, "Yo, I got five. You got five? Let's put 1,000 on a ticket. Let's
Perfect.
send her to go see her sister. Boom, done and done and done." What I love, Brittany, of what you just brought up, and this is the illest, realest thing ever. This is the absolute truth of what Lex Luthor has complained about when it comes to Superman. When he is giving a argument for the presence of Superman that is not so personally motivated from his own ego, he makes a great point that
Mhm.
Superman's presence dulls human ambition. We can't do what he does. So there
Mhm.
comes a point where we will rely on him versus finding the strength to rely on ourselves. As a
Hashtag you're doing the
self-made,
most.
come on now, like
Mhm.
as a self-made man, that's an antithesis concept to Lex. He's like, that is a problem.
Hmm.
And the issue with him being a bad guy is he's not wrong. If you see in the context of how modern society, in the context of the story that you told earlier, there was a flipped over car. People are pulling out phones to capture the moment, not necessarily for the strategic move of verifying what happened, but just to say I was there, right? That could be just as much of a motivating factor. Imagine what that would look like in Metropolis when
Mhm.
Superman is going toe to toe with some villain of the week, and you're like, "Yo, I'm out here." And you're not running for safety. You're
Mhm.
trying to capture the moment to show and verify, "Hey, I was there. I saw what happened." That's ridiculous. But why do you feel comfortable doing that? Because Superman has given you a false sense of invulnerability that is to mirror what his invulnerability is that you don't actually have. That is such a wonderful, wonderful, not quite villainous, but a villain does use it point of view because it is true. And that's the best part of any villain's argument is when they are absolutely right in what they say. Maybe not with what they do, but in what they say. The argument that they've presented is not untrue, which I think is the phrase that we should use for this. It's not that it's not true, it's not untrue. And
Mhm.
that becomes the thing where you gotta dance around it because it's like, ooh, ooh, this is not only possible, it's probable, it's capable, it's not untrue. I gotta give it some weight here because again, she's absolutely right. There are plenty of other people that you could be helping, and he probably could have written a check that could have solved this.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, like, yeah, all of these things can coexist, right? Because human life is complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were all talking about it from this perspective, another thought that I had, which I hadn't thought of the first few times that I read this, is like getting into the psychology of helping, right? And so one debate that happened in the 90s between a couple different authors was, well, why do we help?
Mm.
Do we help to help other people or do we help to help ourselves?
Come on now.
And and they were speaking of it as for a while in the debate, it almost became a binary. And so like I've had conversations with students who are more philosophically oriented who are like, well, there's no true altruism. because you get a good feeling out of helping someone. And I was like, well, can't these all exist, right? The human, we don't just have one motive for doing anything. Most of the time we have multiples, right? And so perhaps Superman, could be helping Mrs. Schomer as much as he's helping himself now. Because we don't know, I have to get the individual pages out again, right? But in addition to all of the requests that he gets that are, most of us would go, okay, yeah, here's a get rich quick scheme, right? There are ones, and I pulled some out later, that he can't do a damn thing about, right? And regardless of whether we can leap tall buildings in a single bound or not, we like to have the perception of agency. And when we feel like we can't do something, we want to try and there've been, experiments on this too, where when you make someone feel like they have less agency and you give them opportunities to do other things, they're going to pick what's going to help satisfy what they feel like they're lacking, right? So here, perhaps Superman maybe just got a letter where he's like, I can't do anything about this. Aha, but here's something I can do now. And yes, maybe I can send a check, and I don't see the outcome.
Right.
But I can see the outcome here. So it could be that part of his helping here in this moment is to reduce his feelings of
ineptitude
in other contexts.
Yep.
So I don't know. I don't know what the writers were thinking when they put this in his head.
Right.
But
and this goes into that whole concept again of there's not an either or scenario. It is it's a mix. It's a plethora of different emotions and intentionalities that are at play at any given time, and that is the makeup of humanity. That's what makes us people, cognizant beings that can see the beauty and simplicity, or the joy in hardship. Like, that's what we are, and this is that showcase.
I had a couple different thoughts. The former wasn't as important. It was more or less just thinking about this, like, is helping always fun or pleasurable? Because like me putting on my toddler's shoes
right.
isn't necessarily giving me all this dopamine that imagine it to give me. But
yeah, exactly. What type of help are we talking about here, right?
Right, like help looks different in different ways. Help doesn't always help is sometimes giving somebody on the corner $1, sometimes buying somebody in in the store a Monster Energy drink like I did. Like, but help looks different in different ways. But
like me wiping my toddler's butt when they refuse to potty train.
That's help.
Like, it's getting them clean, but at the same time, it's enabling them not to have to do it. So
I'm just curious of the experience of others when they have to, and when I say experience of others, I mean the audience, of receiving this information and feeling like, oh, woe is you. Like, we shouldn't have to feel bad for you. And we see this, and I don't mean to downplay it in any way, but like, if something bad happens to a writer or a producer or someone that we idolize or something falls. Like, it's like, well, you're rich and famous, like, who cares?
Right. No, they're still a person.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like, we're reading this, and the audience, like Victor said before, gets to decide the narrative. The narrative can be, oh, this humanizes him and his experience, or it's, cry me a river. So sorry that you're all powerful and you have to like go do some things because you're all powerful. Like, you don't get to have a bad day. And it's kind of the narrative. It's just an interesting, and I really do think that there is a spectrum. Like, there's not one or the other, but it's a curious kind of value system of understanding of like how we as people read this, because our takeaways are going to be gravely different. even if it's like just an inch different.
Mhm.
If it's 100, 1 to 100, like Victor might be at 78, I might be at 62, and Eric, you might be at 40. So we all might just perceive
Yeah.
these scenes, the ones that we've seen so far, as just like markedly different based on our own experiences.
And what I love too about that, going back to, the phrasing of this thing being, untrue, right? Like it's not a matter of it's this or that. It's ranges of these different things. There are contexts of justifiability that you could look at for this. The reason why Superman flew her there is because he didn't know in terms of time how long this woman had. And the easiest way to get her there quickly is for him to take her. That doesn't mean that he stuck around to take her back. Like that doesn't mean that he did that. He could have produced a plane ticket or money or whatever. And was like, you have to find your own way back because I can't just stick around here while this happens. But I want you to know that you are so important to me right now that I'm bringing you to see your sister to make sure that you have time. Like
Right.
that's the thing that you said to me that mattered was this is a question of time, not effort. The effort to me is easy. So I can knock this out. Boom, boom, boom. And so I
Right.
don't know how long you have. So let me get you there. And then getting you back, that's a totally separate thing. We'll figure
Right.
that out later. We're not worried about that. But I'm gonna get you here. And that unto itself could be a part of the helping yourself. She says, in the setup here, I'm on a fixed income. All right. So maybe you can't afford to get there and back, but can you afford to get back?
Right.
Maybe you can afford to get this, or maybe you can like there are different levels that he's imparting himself, but then also possibly giving a bit of responsibility to you to figure out the rest. And that's not necessarily inherent with what we're seeing right here, but it doesn't mean that that's not a part of the help structure that he set up. And how interesting could that be? How many other ways could that be of Superman's going to fly you there, and here's a ticket for Wayne Tech, Airlines that a friend of mine, has donated so that you can fly back. It's a voucher, so you can use this whenever you want to. Those are things that are very possible in the purview of help that Superman can offer that, again, doesn't require much effort for any party involved. The impact is huge, but it's still also a quiet gesture. There's all these different ranges of things that it's neither this way or that way definitively. It's any number of possibilities. And that's what makes these stories so good because, ideally speaking, especially considering the context of the holidays, these are things that are meant to inspire. These are things that are meant to invoke that concept of being the miracle worker to other people, and finding ways that you can help that are comfortable to you and within your ability set to do it. That's the point. That's the myth that you're supposed to, take unto yourself from this particular type of story. And yes, you get, the portrayal of the struggle of the miracle worker itself, but then you also get like this intentional framework of it being a positive overall. Even if, as some of the stories I'm sure we're going to show, it doesn't always work, but sometimes just the act of wanting to help is a statement unto itself.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Let's see. Yeah. Hold on. I gotta move the on my screen, which won't show up in the video. I gotta move the speaker window. Right. Yeah. So we get this here, which again I think shows this issue of complexity of helping. Right. Because at the beginning he's like, "Why do I do this to myself?" Well, this is why I do it. It's good to be Superman. Right? He's getting a warm feeling. He's getting agency, and none of that is necessarily a problem, right? This is like, when I discuss with students who are like, well, if you get a good feeling, then it can't be altruism. And it's like, well, it's a little more complicated than that, right? Then when he gets back, right? And again, I one of the reasons why I love this issue is because it's all about interpersonal moments, right? And so we get more of his relationship with Lois, and here now, she's talking about how she read a lot of letters while he was gone, and it's the best phrase I can think of is one that comes from literature, largely from nursing, but I think it's you could extend it to any sort of helping profession, is the concept of compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about how, like, so I have friends and family who work in the a hospital setting, and I remember it was only a couple years ago now, but towards the end of the pandemic, the end, when my wife had a serious health issue where she almost bled to death, not COVID related, but we go to the hospital and there still are some pandemic restrictions. Um, and while we were in the hospital, not only was I absolutely amazed with the compassion of the people who worked with her, and they're not just working with her, right? They're working with hallways of people, right? Um, and while we're there, the police are called at least once or twice a day to deal with asshole visitors who are not abiding by the hospital's rules, right? And that's just one example. There are many others, right? But so all of this is going on for these essential workers, in this case in the healthcare profession, and that I was in awe of these folks with the fortitude that they showed to me, right? And I'm sure when they were off on their own, they had to deal with their own stuff. A friend of mine who is was in medical research for a while. They were trying to decide whether or not they wanted to be a practitioner or a researcher, and they job shadowed with an OR doctor, and they told me the moment that made them decide that they wanted to steer away from being a practitioner was when they were with this OR doctor and a person died on the table. And they went out with this doctor, and the doctor stopped, and the doctor said, "Hold on," and they went in the corner and they cried. And then after about 5 minutes, they stopped and said, "Okay,
now I'm ready."
Right, I got to go to the next one. And and my friend was like, "Yeah, I don't have the skills for that. Whatever." And we can unpack that, but it just like these are those moments that unless you're doing the work, we don't see these things.
Right.
And I think it's the helpers needing help, I think, is always an important lesson in my mind.
Absolutely.
To think about.
And I think that it's also important to understand the concept of occupational risk, where there are certain ones that seem easy, right? So you go healthcare professionals, it's easy. They have to deal in life and death all the time. But then mental health care professionals have to do it in a subtle way, but still very viscerally true that they're dealing with life or death. When you go into social services, firemen, police officers, EMS, like those are all connected in that same way. And in an unobvious but still connected sort of way, journalism. These are people that have to tell stories objectively about subjective pain. That is hard. Like to have to talk about something matter of factly that you might feel a certain kind of way about, and I am supposed to remove my own intentions out of relaying information to you. That is hard. I think that's one of the, again, in our vastly super politicized system right now, that is a skill set that is being lost, where people are instituting their own personal points of view in storytelling of facts and news. But the truth is, this era of Lois, especially, like that's tough. So this is one of the reasons why she is a tip-top journalist, because she spent this time reading all these stories and regulates it, tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. But I can objectively go, these tragedies can probably be helped with government assistance, charitable donations, things like that. Like she can turn off the sorrow that she innately feels because she clearly recognizes it by calling them tragedies, and functionally can partition where these things can flow to get help to solve the problem. that is again, when it comes to occupational folks, you don't think of journalists in that way, but they absolutely, would be, especially a person like Lois who will be boots on the ground in war zones, crime investigations, uncoverings, exposés, all these different things that put her life in danger. Same concept. I am objectively revealing truth. That is my goal. That is my aim. I am, as a healthcare professional, Brittany, I'm sure you're trying to objectively help people find a comfort place. Is that for you to decide what that comfort place is? No, that's more subjective, and that depends on the person. You're aiming to help. Like, can you find it? Can you find the thing that will help you move forward, arguably without me? Can you get there? Can I help you get there? Those are objective points of view that this kind of encapsulates what those roles are. And I think for the most part in society, we're not seeing that way anymore. It is easy to again politicize a lot of things and go, well, because you're this position, you should have to dot dot dot, or I think you all do this dot dot dot. Not really the way that we should probably move as a collective group of people, and I think this does go along the ways of customer service workers. How many people go into a store and I'm the customer, I'm always right. That's a power that you're wielding incorrectly. You are not being objective to a situation. Well, I should get to do this because I want to, and I'm the customer. Therefore, no, that's a subjective point of view that needs to be deaded because it's ridiculous. And no, like let's look at the scale of responsibility that these people in these different professions are taking by being our caretakers of various scales. Like it's wild. It's absolutely wild.
Yeah, I was good. I've so many thoughts just even based off of yesterday. And like I was so I had a client who I sat with, talked with, processed. We called the police to go take this individual to the hospital because of their intent and things. And then another client called, and then another client called, and then I text them saying, I'm basically, you're in the queue. My client needs. And then there's another one that's like, then you're in the queue too. And there's another person. It's like I really do sympathize with individuals and empathize with individuals who we are born in a way that's like you function to want to help people.
Mhm.
And most often it's because you've been harmed.
Mm.
Most of the heroic people in our lives and in the stories that we read that we
Mhm.
delve into is because they, I don't say this lightly, are damaged
Mhm.
in some
Mhm.
way. And so Lois being a part of it too, like you can't come unscathed after story after story after story after story. And if you want to call it desensitization or something else, but people who are in the working, like I have a new staff member and she's like, well, what do I say if someone asks me why I'm working here? I'm like, because we're all here because we all found our way here. Like we've all been touched by it in some way, like for mental health instance. But it's it's just a friendly reminder that here are these people that consistently have to overcome, and what a wonderful way to say how brave it is to overcome it, despite it being very difficult and challenging. And like she's like the facial expressions that she has, we've seen her have tearful eyes, we have seen her broken down, like we've seen her upset, but this is very serious. This is a very cognitive, intellectual way of understanding emotional experiences.
Mhm.
This is difficult for me, and I'm just trying to ration it out. I'm trying to understand how you and I can make very emotional decisions together, which is hard. it's a very hard skill to teach. It's a very hard skill to learn. So I will say, like, this is a great representation of the fact that there can be incongruence. There can be an emotional experience that is deafening and difficult, but there you can also intellectualize it. Of it reminds me of having to plan a funeral. Ha ha ha, funeral for a friend. And then,
Come on now, come on now.
like the
Yeah.
logistics of it, like I'm torn up, I'm beat up, my soul, my spirit hurts, but we still got to figure out how we plan this burial, what time it's going to be, if we're going to have speakers, how many speakers, what time, like all of those things are the intellectual part of the grieving experience. And so this is not death by necessity, but like this is loss. You're going to lose some of these people. These are the people that are going to float down the river while you go try to get someone to safety. Like you're going to lose someone. And so how do you try to make it, I always try to say, like, above the neck things besides below.
That's deep. That is deep.
Yay.
I love it. I love it. Can I ask this weird question? When it comes to resources, Superman says, "Good idea. They're far better equipped than I am." I call that a context of resource. Would you find it at all a separation or a step away from Superman's personal charter of being this person that aims to help and inspire others if he personally guaranteed a level of wealth that would allow him to stand in for government assistance? By way of this, okay, so, and I'm using this for a story myself, actually. There is a comet or meteor somewhere out in the universe that is filled with enough minerals of high value that if we were to cultivate it, everyone on Earth is a level of millionaire based on the value. Like if you just disseminated it to everybody, there's enough where like everyone is a millionaire plus, right? If Superman were to go and get enough of this minerals that he, gets it processed, things like that, starts up Superman Inc., and he has access to the material value of this, where he is literally a quadrillionaire. But the goal is, I am using this money to supplement any situation that me punching doesn't help, right? So a big major disaster has come through, and maybe I've staved off a good portion of issue, but there's a part of the city that got destroyed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little personal fund and I'm going to buy the materials to replace everything. And then I will personally come in and I'll fix it, which means that it's not going to be necessarily a cost burden on anybody else. And due to my speed and strength, I can probably do so faster than other people. Would that be a heroic stance, or would it be a problem? Would it cause economic crash in the face of these disasters, where ideally speaking, there would be an economic push where there are crews, there are companies that would get money for helping to rebuild, and they don't have they don't have the opportunity to do so because Superman has come in and he's, saved the day financially as well? Would that be a problem if Superman upgraded his power source to also include a financial bit?
I think the latter.
Okay.
Eric, what do you think?
I think we just created an entire another series of that question.
I'm sorry. It's the way my head works. It's the way my head works.
No, but I mean, it's great. I mean, yeah, it's like this statement here. They're far better equipped than I am. Right now, is that accurate? Is that just the writers putting that on him? Because he could say, yeah, actually, no, I could go and mine this and then give you all this resource.
Yes.
But yeah, I think we'll put a pin in that.
Okay. All right.
Because okay, so I put this next page up here, and I mean, again, we could probably spend hours unpacking each panel. But one of the things that impressed me the most about this set of pages is, as Superman's, of course, reading this letter, and Lois is kind of basically being his support person. right, emotionally to sort of navigate the tragedies as well as the ridiculous requests. We get this moment where he's reading, and in the middle of it, he kind of, it sort of basically zooms in, right, where he's reading about, the story, the letter essentially that's on the cover, um, of the young person whose parent is dying of cancer. And again, we have like this increasing amount of shadows, right, from the top left, just a little bit on the profile, to suddenly he's surrounded by shadows, to this zoom in where again we get even less of his face than previous. Like that seems to be a common theme throughout all of this. Um and it ends with, what are you gonna say to him? And he's like, the only thing I can say, I can't do anything.
Yeah.
It's just I don't know. I just saw it. So that series of moments struck me.
Well, I mean, to your point of the darkness and the shadow, it is the sense of responsibility that his heroism has taken. Like it is, like Brittany keeps saying, Brittany has pointed out that burden is the wrong word to use, but it's the best word that we have to truly illustrate this concept, that there's this weight to it that gets heavy and daunting, and it eclipses you like these shadows do. But at the same time, what is brilliant in the subtlety of this presentation is that what Superman is deciding to do is to meet the failure head on. He's showing up to tell the kid to his face, I can't do it. I'm taking the time to come to you and subject myself to your ire, your disappointment. I am here to experience when the truth of my inability sets in for you too, that I can't do this. And what happens is, in that sense, the heroism is not in undoing the request or doing the request. It is telling you that in the face of this defeat, you're not alone. I'm here with you. It's taking what being a hero is and changing it. It's not that I did the thing to save the day. I didn't leave you behind to face the pain alone. That's why I'm the hero. And it's in all of these things that Superman is Superman. It is him being a person. This is showing up to that friend's house and just letting them cry. And because you're there, they feel comfortable to do that. And they're not alone, literally not alone, but then emotionally not alone as well. And that's a gift. Like this is what I have. This is my song, and I'm singing it for you. This is what I got, the little drummer boy. Like this is the same concept of those things at play. Again, feeding into that concept of the modern myth and what we should take from it. Maybe we don't have the answer, but we can give an answer that gives comfort.
And then I would add, just for fun facts, for people who like fun facts, who do you think are the 5 professions that are most likely to get divorced?
Ooh. Police officers?
That's one.
Lawyers?
Doctors?
Doctors?
Ooh, I can see doctors. I can definitely see doctors.
Actors? No, not actors. All right.
Military is number 1. Police officers are number 2. Therapists are number 3.
Makes sense.
Nurses, and then anyone in the medical care field. So all of these caregiving people have a lot of burden, not just for themselves, but their partners as well, because they can't be fully present because they can be exhausted at work day to day.
Right.
And so I can't love you the way you need. And so for Lois, like I see, like even in the second to last frame, she's shadowed because there's pieces of herself missing at this point. Because I want to extend, I want to help, I want to love, I want to like support, I want to be somebody that can be there, but it's draining. Like these relationships are draining. And so I think just to keep in mind just the scope of the helping professions
Mhm.
and the scope of the heroic nature of these stories, like the task that it takes not only on them, but the partners that support them.
Yeah, because families are interdependent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I love that point, Brittany. Makes me think of why I was so pissed off when Lois and Clark was canceled in the fourth season, because they're like, well, it was a romantic comedy show or whatever,
It
and now they're
can't
married
be.
and we're done, right? The tension's gone. And I'm like, no, you're just getting
No.
started.
Yeah, it's
Like, what
brand
is it
new
like to be
tension.
married to like the ultimate doctor?
Right.
Right?
Oh my goodness. This is one of the reasons why Superman and Lois as a show works so well,
Mhm.
because there are so many different aspects of what that reality is like,
Mhm.
especially in the later seasons where spoilers for anyone that hasn't watched, but like Lois has cancer. What
Mhm.
an interesting thing I don't even think they've touched on it, but like, what if there's a question of her proximity to him is what gave her cancer?
Oh, 1000%.
You know what I'm saying? Like, oh my God. And then what is he supposed to do with that? I
Didn't
don't,
they do that in a Superman story? Or was that a different?
it was Spider-Man.
It was
Spider-Man
Oh,
Reign, they
it was
did it. Yeah.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man Reign, they did it. Yeah.
Yes, the Marvel Knights one. Yeah, that's
Yep.
what it
Yep.
was.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Where they almost implicitly said the radioactivity of his biometrics is everywhere, including bodily fluid. So his intimacy with MJ killed her. And I'm like, that's wild. That is hefty stuff, especially for them to say that to a character as neurotic as Spider-Man, who's gonna be like, I did this. I did this by loving her. I did this. This is what happened. Because that's how Pete will take everything. But like with Superman, again,
Mhm.
like you said, being that ultimate
Yeah.
savior figure,
Mhm.
being married to this wonderfully ambitious, independent woman,
Mhm.
that's a whole new level of tension.
Mhm.
Because when she does something, he's like, "Oh, I had to save you." She's like, "No, you didn't. Leave me alone. I'm doing my job. You go do your job. I'm doing my job. You leave me alone." Who is wrong? Neither one
Right.
is wrong, and that's what makes it brilliant.
Yeah. And if and when they decide to have children, right, either biologically or adopting or
Yep,
whatever,
yep,
that increases the complexity of the situations.
love
And
it.
I don't know, like I understand why they didn't go that way, at least in Lois and Clark. It
They
sounds
weren't
like they
ready.
did it. I haven't seen Superman and Lois yet, but
Oh,
it
you would love
sounds
it.
like that they're willing to go there now.
Hmm.
But I don't know, like I'm like, these are interesting stories,
Mhm.
right? And again, things that people can relate to. Maybe
Hmm.
not like, the I'm saving the world from this crashing meteor, but the
But
emotional gravitas
yeah,
of Brittany, you mentioned military service folks, right? And service folks have to leave when they're
mhm,
called, whether it's they just got married, maybe they just had a kid,
yep,
right? I mean, like, so these are things that people have to deal with.
right.
Um, and I love the fact that we have stories and storytellers who will go there
Hmm.
regardless of what networks decide to do.
Yes, yes,
Um,
yes.
so I do want I love the point that and then we've been circling around this, but this idea of social support and what Superman can do in this moment, or what the writers are willing to let him do, right?
Hmm.
Because let's be clear, what our friend and colleague Dr. Travis Langley would often say that well, who would win in a fight, and the right answer is
Whoever's
whoever
writing
the
it.
writers want.
That's right.
um, but so in this case, presumably the cancer is inoperable, right? Uh, and so he could have ignored this letter and said, I can't do anything about it, right? But he goes to be with this young person in that moment because that's all he can do. And I'm been doing a lot more of my work has been leaning into studying social support, and the importance of it, and how to train ourselves and our offspring, future generations, on how to be comfortable just being in that moment with the person and letting them cry, right? Letting them be in the suck. Because I just personally now thinking about all of the times where people have given me cold comfort, botched social support, whatever you want to call it. They've been trying their best, but they usually say something because they feel like they have to, as a to fix the situation.
Yeah.
There's not a damn thing you can do to fix what happened.
You got to go through it. You have to
Right.
go through it. Brittany, do you see that as something that we have evolved societally to be a little bit more cognizant of, that there was a point in the past where feeling bad was something to solve, as opposed to it being a part of a process that is self-solving? That, part of the reason why you feel bad is because you had an emotional connection. You are trying to, process your feelings and all these things. And boom, this is how you get to this place of functionality after the fact, where for a while we didn't quite understand that it was, oh, you're feeling bad, I need to get you out of feeling bad, so I'm going to try to make you feel better. When the truth is, sometimes we have to feel bad to get to feeling better. Like where that's how our social emotional bodies work. That, we have to allow it to process, as opposed to trying to fight the process by getting all the way to the end, by jump starting.
I'll say two things. One, I think we still have a lot of way to move
Yes.
towards the ability to just like access our emotions, articulate our emotions. It's the same reason when we go through the grocery store and it's like, how you doing? We all say fine, even though you're probably not fine. And like something when I talk to some of my clients, if they tell me some horrific story, and especially because I work with grief and loss every day, and they tell me, or trauma and things of that nature, they tell me some horrific thing, and I just say, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And they say, it's okay. And I'm like, it's not okay.
Not okay. It's not okay.
It's not. It's just the things that you've described to me were the way that your parent treated you, the way that you've experienced the world, the way that someone assaulted you. Like, these things are not okay. You want to say these things to appease me because you believe it's socially normative,
Appropriate, right?
but it's not what you need to say with me, because I'm creating a space for you to be safe to say it's not okay. And I think that most people are desensitized to the idea of being like, oh shoot, if I say what I really feel, I am a burden. I'm someone no one wants to be around. I suck. I'm not resilient enough. And I've said it before, but I was like, everybody has a different resilience level. All of us are on a spectrum. And every time we talk about trauma, every time we talk about loss, every time I talk about grief, I have to indicate what's your first experience and how did it affect you? Because that's going to be different for every single person. When I hear someone say that the first time they lost somebody at 35 versus the first time you lost someone at 5, it's going to be very vastly different. And so, what I think overall is that we're moving in the right direction of compassion, understanding, um, loving, if affirming, if you want to say that. But I think that there's lots of room to grow to stop apologizing for having feelings, because there's a lot of shame attached to it, because the assumption is that you will be resilient and you should overcome. That's the, and I don't want to sound political about it, but that's the American dream.
Well,
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You're going to be fine. You were in a crappy situation 5 minutes ago, but you should be good. Like Eric's situation, like he gave the example of someone passed away, walked down for 5 minutes, cried, and then let's do it over again.
Yep.
That's the assumption. That's the baseline. And that's something to look up to, especially if you're a novice person learning in a new field. The thing to learn is get over yourself. It's nothing. Like, you'll be fine. Like, it's okay. And it is so challenging because there's a lot of people who don't have the skills to teach young people to learn the skills to be able to self-regulate. So we have a bunch of unregulated and escalated people in the world because we just don't know. We don't know what we don't know. And it's just hard because you're working with, loving, feeding, interacting with people who don't know what they don't know.
And
Yeah.
I love that point you make there, Brittany, about not knowing what we don't know, because what just hit me now is, all my friends saw was that particular moment. And then moving on to the next thing. But what they didn't see was what that doctor did after leaving the office. So I
Oh
have,
my God.
yeah. So I have another friend who's also in the medical field who was talking to me about their experiences during COVID, and the amount of people that they saw who died,
Sure.
and then the traumas that they experienced. And um, so they talked with me later, right? And we had a moment where they were able to unpack a little bit about whatever they bottled up, right? And so this, jumping back to my friend in the OR, right? That doctor at that moment said, okay, I'm gonna put this in a corner and I'm gonna do what has to be done next. But does it stop there? Right? Versus, is there training to help coach these upcoming professionals to say, okay, yes, you you need to quote unquote bottle it in this moment so you can do the job, and you shouldn't just leave it there, right?
Can I give you guys
Please do.
an example?
Oh,
So,
please do.
how many are for you two?
Mhm.
Have you ever had a really hard day and that drive home, the second that you parked, you're like, those were the best like 15 minutes of this day because it was quiet, because I listened to a podcast, I listened to the radio that I wanted to hear, and now I still have life. I still have my kid. I still have my family. I still have to maybe make dinner. I still have to do laundry. Like, think about like in this hero, like that flight of being like, this is my time to kind of like try to clear my thoughts, but I still have life. Like, there are so few and far between people who like support other people who have downtime, who have relaxation time, or have a time to like disconnect from the crises of their life. And especially as being a super, that has to be few and far between. And I would consider both of you guys supers because you guys are parents and wonderful human beings who are very busy in your life and doing wonderful things. And it's like, there's that drive that you're like, I just I need that drive, but that 15-minute reset's not going to change, like, isn't going to change the day.
That's an interesting sort of introspective thing, because I think for myself, I tend to compartmentalize really well so that what that 15 minutes looks like to me wouldn't be obvious for anybody else. It would be like, uh, okay, so this spring when my mom passed, and literally days later, I'm at a Comic-Con smiling, laughing, and having fun with everyone, as well as having my birthday that same week. Going to the show was like my 15 minutes because it was being in a space that I could be my best self not to push away any sorrows or anything like that from my mom's passing, but turning the experience into a celebration of her. Like that's my personal natural instinct, which I think might make me a mutant of some sort. It's possible. Like
No, I think
that's
it's an escape from the life. Like,
yes, right. Like, but in my escape, it's delving further into the life that I live. So I think I'm an interesting one because I literally have built a lifestyle of self-motivated interests. I not working because I have to. I work because I want to, because I work in a field that I want to. So literally going to work or doing things of work is my safe place because it is the world that I got to build. I think people would be a lot happier if they themselves got to build their worlds like that.
same.
And I think that is the only sort of separation that I can really give to that question is I built a world that I really enjoy. So, even in the context of like COVID, how many people didn't like COVID and being stuck at home because truthfully, they don't really like their house. They don't like the space that they're in. They don't like the people that they house with. They don't really like them. I don't have that per se. So those things that would be that catalyst or trigger point where you would need that 15 minutes, I actually don't have it because early on I built an environment where I go, I know I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And again, further to what you said, I have the privilege of challenge because I was able to build a world like that for myself where I don't really have to deal with it that way. So I'm not necessarily the right person to ask because I think I might have built things early on that safeguards me from that.
Which is
And
perfect. Which is a
it's
perfect answer. It's like
perfect.
not every not every again, resilience levels can be
Yes,
on a
yes,
spectrum. It's
yes,
perfect.
absolutely, absolutely. Oh, I love it. I love it.
My mind just started to go to a t-shirt that we should make with all the different trademarked phrases that we've come up with.
I love it. I love it.
Uh, in the interest of keeping us moving, we get now Superman hanging out with Terry, right? Who we've learned in the previous pages that he gets there and Terry's father had passed. And understandably, Terry's upset. And as Victor mentioned earlier, right, like he's now the person who is getting the emotions that Terry has, right? And that is part of being with someone in the suck, right? That whatever they need, that's there. And of course here he's having a back and forth with Terry about what he can and can't do. Coming at this from the sort of comic construction perspective, I immediately think, well, we see this. So him kneeling down with Terry, who's on the ground, right? I mean, obviously he's taller than him anyway, regardless of whether they're standing or squatting. But we get this low angle shot, which in comics and in cinema generally denotates sort of a vulnerability for the subjects of the frame, right? And so I'm struck by that, and I'm struck by that last little bubble that we have there. But you're Superman, right? And Terry emphasizes the super. And in the next one, now we get a upshot, medium angle with some interesting shadow use again. Superman then says, "No, I'm Superman," and the italicus comes on the man, which to bring it back to Lois and Clark, makes me think of this exchange that Lois and Clark have in that particular show after Superman has come out to her with his dual identity, and he's there. He says, "Superman is what I can do. Clark Kent is who I am." right? And so here we have this wonderful, I mean, it's subtle, it's the same damn word, right? But the emphasis,
but it's
everything. Right there.
I want to play the bad guy on this one.
Please do.
Superman comes in, the kid's dad has already passed. If Superman had said, I just got the letter today, am I too late? And the kid's like, yes, he passed. And he's like, damn it, I'm so sorry. I just got the letter. I came as soon as I could. If he maintains the concept, idea, prospect that he could have saved this kid's dad, is that a bad thing for Superman to do, where the kid still has to deal with loss, but what he doesn't have to lose is his heroic positioning of Superman, someone who he thought he could count on? He's not taking that away from him. Would that have been wrong?
So I actually wrote a paper on
Let's go.
Let's go.
I actually wrote a paper a while ago on the different types of lies.
Okay.
And you can have essentially a noble lie. This is somebody who knows that they have cancer and knows that they have 3 months to live, but then tells their family they're going to beat it. Is that a noble lie? It could devastate the family, but at the same time, it preserves the idea that there's hope and other things like that. So it just depends, again, like on morality. Like there are some things that are untruths. We've thrown that word back again.
Yes.
We're going full circle. But like there are untruths, but to the detriment of who? Is it easier for me to carry this burden or this weight of this thing? Or do I believe that you would be better off not knowing?
Right.
And I also love the idea of thinking, how powerful do you think that you are to decide? Like you get to decide that this person is better off not knowing.
Wow.
Yes.
What if I told you, like, yeah, like I got the letter, couldn't help your dad. Sorry about it. Like, what if that is a better healing process than you saying, I just got the letter yesterday, I couldn't help you, I'm so sorry, this is awful. Then what does that spark? Who knows? But like, why do you get to be like the protagonist in the story when really the other person who's hurting is the protagonist?
That's an interesting one. So to that end, let's say Superman gets to the hospital and through the use of his senses, he realizes the boy's father has passed. Would it have been better for him not to go in?
That's like a Schrodinger's cat thing.
I know, right? Like, because
is the cat alive or dead?
By him going in, he is put in that position of I'm deciding for you what truth you need to know. The truth that you already know is that your father passed. Flat out. Now I'm going to come in. I'm going to tell you, I got your message. Whether I got it just now, earlier, whatever, I got it, and I came too late. Because none of those things change what you have to accept right now that your dad passed. Now I'm trying to make you and me feel better by revealing that I don't think there was anything that I could have done. I could not have saved him. I don't have the means. I'm not a doctor. Okay, sure. But there are a lot of things that, contextually, if Kid was like, yeah, but what if there was some Kryptonian technology that you could have, like, you have to tell him, like, well, I didn't consider all that. That's my fault. Like, I didn't go and look. I didn't read. Maybe I could have used microscopic vision with a short, heat vision burst and took care of this thing. I just didn't get the message until just now. Because that's the truth. I didn't get the message till just now. Maybe I show up and maybe there is something that I can do, but I didn't know until I got here. Like, is that a better use of the truth and an explanation as to why he got here? And in that result, the kid doesn't necessarily go, excuse my French, but screw you, Superman, you're not the guy that I thought you were. It is, you don't know what you can do until you get there. And so you're not discounting yourself. You're being honest about, like, I'm here. I don't know what I could have done. I don't know, if I could have seen something, drilled something, done. I have no idea what I could have done, but I'm here because I wanted to show up for you.
I would say, um, before I get to the grief stuff, I just want to point out the reason that they're creating this, and like good for them for 92 for allowing like him to
Facts.
be lowered with the child, is
Yes,
that you want
yes.
to look eye to eye with
Mhm,
kids, or you
mhm,
want to look eye to eye with someone who's smaller than you, because then that equals the playing field of communication as
mhm,
opposed to dominating somebody. So if he were standing, it would have been detrimental to the
mhm,
conversation. So this creates a more compassionate stance
absolutely,
of the
absolutely.
conversation. But like the nice thing about this is that, and what you're saying, Victor, is we don't know.
Mhm, mhm.
People are gonna people, and we
Ooh,
have no idea how we have no idea how someone will react.
right.
We can try to protect them as best we can. I know we're all parents, like we can try to make sure that they are functioning human beings and this
Mhm,
exists in the world, that are safe and all these things. But if I say something that hurts you, it hurts you. If I don't say something that hurts you, it
still hurts you.
hurts you.
Come on now.
And so the challenging part is like you can dissect it in so many ways, which is a fun way to kind of like
Mhm,
look at this, and a great like storyline, because it can go many different ways. Like he can lie, he can not lie, he can kind of deceive, he can minimize, he can say like
mhm,
he can go so many ways, and the audience gets to decide if it's true, and the
mhm,
audience gets to decide if it's fair,
mhm,
because you get to put yourself in that role of
mhm,
what would I do?
mm,
And
mm,
how do I feel in relation to this person based off of their decision? So this person does a noble lie. I appreciate that. I think that's
mhm.
fair. I think that's understanding. But if I live in a world in which people have hurt me or something else, that noble lie doesn't mean anything to
Doesn't
me.
help me at all. Doesn't help me at
It
all.
does not benefit me.
Ooh.
It did not work in my life. It would have been better off knowing that you weren't going to be here. It would have been better off knowing that you weren't my Superman. And the differentiation of Superman
Mhm.
and Superman
Man.
is going to be is essential to be very concrete, because it's like, hey, like we talked about a little bit earlier, like I'm a man first because that's how I grew up. That's how I understood the world. That's how I understood humanity. Like I'm man first, and I just happen to be super.
Mm, mm,
So therefore, like we have to look at him through a lens of like, you're making choices that, do I think I would make that choice?
right.
And if not, do I love you? Do I hate you? Do I despise you? Do I understand you? Do I fear you? How do I relate to you based off the choices that you made? And how does that reflect my choices?
Mhm, mhm.
Well, and just and I have full disclosure because Superman's always been one of my favorite. Like Bibbo, he's my favorite. Um, um, one of the things that when I look at this moment, not having ever literally been in this moment, in terms of narrative, but you mentioned earlier, we're all parents, right? And we have to help our kids navigate the world in a way that is developmentally appropriate,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to decide, what do we want to say, right? Do we want to go with a noble lie, which I love that phrase, Brittany, because you
Yay!
also called it a lie,
All these
right?
shirts.
Right, yeah, on the shirt, right? I mean, you called it a lie. You said exactly what it is, right? Versus So I can think about when I'm comforting my kids about various things, right? And when what do we do? What do we do? What do I do? I'm gonna own this shit, right? Um, I say it's okay, or it's all right, or what does that mean, right? Or it's okay to feel this way. So I can think about a few years ago where there was this really crazy storm. And it scared the crap out of my kids. And I lay down on the floor of their bedroom, and I do say it's okay. I'm here to keep you safe. And I also said, Daddy's afraid of the storm too. And that just kind of happened. And as I reflect on that, I'm like, no, I want the kids to know I'm keeping them as safe as I can. And I want them to know that this is scary. That this sucks, right? It hurts. Um and I don't know how much of it is our language here in the US, right? I mean, there are other languages where they have crazy words that can, thinking German, for example, right? Schadenfreude or
That's
other
right.
words that are ridiculous amounts of syllables, but they capture the complexity of an emotion that in English we may not have. How do you say it's okay, you're safe, but this shit sucks in one word?
Right. Life. That's
Yeah, there we go. Life.
That,
People. Life keeps life.
that's it. That's it. All of them. All of them. No, that's real. I take especially a personal stint on that. I just had a conversation with my firstborn son, and we had a disagreement about something. He was mad at me, and he wanted me to do something, and I chose to do something else. And it was a matter of in our conversation, and I just talked to him about it the other day. I was like, you have hit a new level of maturity because you've now experienced what it's like to be disappointed in your father because I didn't do the thing that you wanted me to. The truth of the matter, though, is I wasn't wrong for why I chose what I wanted to do, but I could tell you that I did it because this is what I want to do. And what you want to do is now going to be put over here because you're old enough that your desires are for you to figure out, not for me to figure out. And now we've got like 20 years old. Like, we've got to have some movement here. And it was an interesting thing because it wasn't something that I did that in the moment to make that point, but it was in the aftermath of it all that I'm like, no, that's what that does. That's what this is. And this is a huge step in you determining what sort of adult you're going to be. You can't just come to me and be like, well, Dad's got the answer. Now, my answer may not be your answer, and that's okay. I might have been your guide for how to do things for a long time, but there comes a point where what makes sense to me is the exact opposite of what makes sense to you. And I've had it with my father, and congratulations, you're having it with yours. And we are now getting to a place where, and this is how you become your own individual self. This is how what your morality compass and your, institutions of what is right and wrong start to really take shape. I've given you my foundation, which is built on the foundation that mine gave me, but I still had to make determinations for myself, by myself, of what I think is right and wrong. Now the ball is in your court. What do you think is right and wrong? And this, I think, plays into that concept of, for Clark, it is absolutely right to be as revealing as possible to say, this is why I couldn't even have helped, even if I got this on time. I'm laying it bare. I am not omnipotent. I am not, so powerful that I can do things that could and should be impossible. I don't have the skills for it. That is me bearing to you. I am, prostrating myself before you and saying, I'm not as big as you think I am. So take that as you will. This is me gifting you the unburden of thinking that I'm perfect and I don't fail. Yes, I do. And because I fail, maybe that makes it a little bit okay if you fail. Like there's so many things in context to what Clark's personality says is the right thing to do versus other people. again, as Clark said, I'm not a doctor. Well, this kid has clearly been around a bunch of doctors and they didn't do it. So how do you figure saying I'm not a doctor is a help? Like these guys are doctors and they couldn't do it. So that's a false equivalency of support here. Like, what are you talking about? But that's Clark's truth. And in his truth, in his effort to try to be as open in a sense of grief possible, this is what he does. He gives like the fullest measure of himself by saying, hey, this is what I'm not. I am Superman. Superman, not Superman. Like I'm gonna tell you what I'm not right now because you have almost an unhealthy opinion of what I am.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and his again, this is my bias, but I seem to be connecting with him as I often do. Um, I experience this vulnerability in this moment, right? That he's being as honest as he can, right? I mean, to be fair, he's also not being like, so I got this other life, right?
My name's Clark Kent, and
right.
Well, I want Pulitzers. Don't you come at me with it. No,
right. But I mean, he didn't have to go there,
right.
right? And would he have felt guilty for not? Sure. He also knew that he was going to have to face this moment. So for at least for me, I experience as a moment of humanity and compassion, where he sits with this kid, and whether what he says is right or wrong or otherwise, he's there for him. And he didn't have to be.
Right. I mean, the kid gave an out too in the letter. Doesn't he say, like, I don't know if this will reach you in time?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if he did not show up, there's already a built-in protection from the kid in this regard. So again, I take it as a huge measure of Clark's earnestness that he did show up to reveal, like, yeah, I did get it. I'm sorry I came too late, but the truth is I couldn't have done it no matter what. Like I am incapable of fixing this. Which I think is again part of that noble structure. It's obviously not a lie, but it's a level of nobility that most people would not be able to live with by way of coming through and saying, like, yeah, I'm here. I still couldn't have done anything. I couldn't have done a thing about this.
Well, I was thinking of this, like the concept of like fixing this, and I'm like, but he did. He showed up.
He did, right?
He could have not. So this tiny human could
Yep.
Right.
experience two major losses, or really three, of my father succumbed,
Right.
the thing that I wanted didn't happen,
Yep.
and the person that I needed most let me down.
Ooh.
All three of those could have happened and devastated this child's life,
Yeah.
and could have put them on a trajectory that could have been categorically different than what we imagined them to be today.
Yeah.
But like instead, a bad thing happened, and then I got some closure. So
And even if he doesn't
fix
understand it
things in a
now,
little bit, yeah,
right?
like
Yeah.
especially now.
Yeah. Figure
And
like some
in a
15
way
years
that
from now.
Oh, sorry.
No, you figure like 15 years from now, he tells somebody this story and is like, he actually showed up. And he's like, well, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm so. Oh, he did, didn't he? Like, even if he doesn't realize the gift that he's been given now, it's still, like you said, that seed has been planted that no, he saved him from losing full hope in light of this darkness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he could stop and think.
The hardest day of my life became a hard day in my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, because he could have stopped and said, well, Superman could have been across the world saving people from an earthquake.
Right.
So I jumped forward here towards the end. And for those who are listening, if you can get a hold of this issue, there's a whole lot more in there. I recommend you do that. We have two things that happen towards the end. One is that after he has this moment with Terry, he does remember that there was some other letter he got where someone needed an organ transplant. And Terry's mother decides to donate her husband's organs. And Superman, of course, does fly the organ to the heart, I believe, to the person who needs it, and that's what we see here at the end. So Mrs. Baldwin really came through that an ordinary person can make a bigger contribution than a Superman every day, right, or any day, right? So there's a lot going on here, right? We could talk about this as an advertisement for being an organ donor, right? We could talk about this as the DC authors communicating to people, hey, y'all got power. You can't leap tall buildings in a single bound, but you can make a difference in your own way.
Sorry, still save lives. Still save lives, no matter what.
Yes, exactly. And you also have in the midst of this, the end of the story, which I don't think I pulled any panels out for. He then at the end does go to like a can't remember if it's a children's hospital or an orphanage, but he flies Santa there. And one of the best parts, Batman makes a cameo.
Oh wow!
In this issue, because he's like, they need presents. And I, as a reporter in my day job, don't have the liquid assets for this, but I know someone who does. So he calls up Batman, calls up Bruce Wayne, right? They respect the identities. And it's like, hey, Superman here. I want to go help some kids. Can you fund some presents? And Batman does.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so just there are a lot of interesting moments in this. And again, no fists are thrown. Right? There is no like nuclear reactor that's going to melt down, or an asteroid heading towards Earth, or a supervillain deciding they want to take over, right? We've spent over 2 hours at this point talking about just human reality. Brittany, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah. I'm a big because I'm a collaborative language specialist or systems theorist. I have a little bit of an issue with the way it's worded with is like Mrs. Baldwin really came through. Guess it really
please,
that.
yes.
Just in the sense of it seemed a little benign, like just like, oh, just giving up your organs. Oh well, like it didn't seem like this like really monumental thing, because as adults we can understand that like this is a really big deal. This is like a very intimate thing that occurs. This is a very powerful thing that occurs. This is a life-changing thing that occurs. But just to say that's like, yeah, she came through. That's like you came through with cheeseburgers. Like
good looking out, Mrs. B. Yeah. Hey, she a real one, right?
Mrs. B. No, like I just wish it was a little bit more worded, just in a more powerful way of I don't even know what the words would be.
Right.
Be like, or maybe this sacrifice made sense, like something to the extent of like this was important, a heart for a heart, or like something that was a little bit bigger, that again this would blow by young people who don't understand what's happening, but like something to even like plant a seed of being like, this is something that is absolutely volunteer, absolutely a very difficult decision of a person who loved this person. Like it seemed more monumental. Like I wish that the language was written just a little bit differently.
I see that. I definitely see that.
Yeah.
It's I think this is one of those things where, as they are needing to wrap up a story, you have to sacrifice some intentionality in terms of the words and the input. Because you're right. Like at the time, this is a big deal, and it reads as a little expositional, which is like, oh, this happened, and this happened, and this happened. So good. And it would have been more
Yeah.
interesting if he was like, you know, what are the chances, right? Like, so you play up the idea of circumstance, being like, what are the chances that this guy, I wasn't able to save, but matched this person, and that I happened to be there because I chose to, supplicate myself to the fact that I might have disappointed him, but in doing so, I was able to take this organ over here in time to be a gift and miracle to somebody else. This is
Even
why
something like I saved because he saved.
boom, boom. Put the mic down. Oh my goodness. You didn't just drop it, you chucked that mic across the that's what I'm talking about. Yes. Because that is Superman in context. That's the
Right.
Brady, I'm gonna build a time machine so you can go back and you can step in the room when they're writing this and you can tell them, because that is
it makes so much sense. Like it feeds back into, like you were saying, the Superman, like I say because he saved, like I'm not this person that could have done it. I am doing it I'm only able to do it because the people in the world are able to do it. Like it's an extension of my experience, like my powers.
Yeah. So, and I mean, it's creatives got to do what they got to do, right, within the constraints they have.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, the fact that we spent 2.5 hours just talking about one issue.
Just saying.
Right.
Just saying.
This happens every time.
Yeah. Absolute headcanon from now on. That's what happened. Okay. So if anybody, like, trivia question pops up, what did Superman say? Oh, what he said was, the reason why I save is because, people save. This man saved. That's why I do it. And it's co-written by Dr. Brittany. Like, I'm just, if I get a copy of this,
so many
just write your
shirts.
name on there. I got you.
So many shirts.
Oh my God, that's brilliant. That is brilliant. Literally brilliant. Wow.
So the last image I have here, actually, I mean, does fit kind of, regardless of the execution of the
That's good.
Yeah. So I have a friend, Matt Wright, who works for Unshaven Comics. And back in probably the late 2000s, he had this shtick where he was doing random characters as lanterns. And I was big into the Jeff Johns, Blackest Night, emotional spectrum. So I've got, you can't see this, but on my left here, I have an entire wall of characters that from different intellectual properties that I thought would be different lanterns. And the very first one that started this off was I commissioned him to do Superman. And I couldn't decide between the Blue Lantern, the Hope Lantern, and the Indigo Tribe Compassion. Now, of course, when I finally read more of those things and realized, well, actually, no. So it was after Blackest Night when they revealed more about the Indigo Tribe, and you realize where those characters came from.
Right.
But before that, the idea of hope and compassion were two things that I most associated with Superman, and that was even before I read this issue. Right. And so afterwards, I was like, yeah, no, this was a good commission. Not just because Matt's an amazing artist, but
big shout out to Matt. I love Matt.
Yeah. So besides, I wanted to throw that in there.
That's awesome.
I'll throw in the video connections to Matt and Unshaven Comics so you can look at their stuff as well. But yeah, just what is heroism, right?
Yeah.
And we can spend another 4 hours talking about that. And for me, it's not about what you can do, it's about what's driving it. And sitting with other people, this desire towards hope and improving things, those seem to come up in my mind.
Yeah, no, the why is everything. I think that's the ultimate thing of what makes heroes is the why, and it supersedes what they get out of it, because again, that dopamine hit that, you know, because I did something good doesn't mean that I didn't do something good. And if my intentionality was to do the good thing, what I get out of that is secondary as a response. You know, if I truly intended to do the good thing because I wanted to do the good thing, that's really all that matters.
Well, and I think it's also like we assume that there's this like massive call to action, like there's a fire, there's a standoff or a bank robbery. Like we assume that those are like these big things that make people heroic, but it's opportunities day to day of living
Mhm.
in and outside of the comics that's like what are esteemable acts that you decide or you choose to make that make you heroic, and we all get to make those choices every single day. And what a wonderful thing to have this, I keep saying it's privilege, but this point of privilege to be able to do so.
Mhm.
Like I can, if I hear domestic violence next door or something, I can call the cops. That's
Mhm.
heroic. Like if I, see somebody fall down and, you know,
Show her to help. That's also heroic.
if I open a door for somebody, like all of these
Mhm.
things, you get to decide like the narrative, and I think esteemable acts is like kind of how I understand heroism.
I love it. I love it.